The Brown County Historical Commission and Brown Woods Lyric Theater, in cooperation with the Brown County Museum and the R.B. Rogers House and Events Venue, present Bygone Brown. Episode 5, Lincoln's Escort. From the first shots fired on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor on April 12, 1861, to the surrender of General Robert E. Lee's Army of North Virginia at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9, 1865, for 4 years, April to April, Americans fought Americans, North fought South, and brother fought brother in the bloodiest conflict ever conducted on American soil. The number of dead was staggering. 1 out of every 5 soldiers died in the war. 2.5% of the total population at the time, and the outnumbered South suffered the most, with only about 800,000 troops against the North's 1.2 million. The body count of Southerners far exceeded that of Northerners, with 3 Confederate deaths for every Northern one. Texas, being so physically remote from the major theaters of war, suffered from its deprivations. The absence of its menfolk, the disruptions of its trade, the blockades of its ports, but witnessed none of the bloodletting that stained those distant battlefields. No Shiloh, no Antietam, no Gettysburg nor Vicksburg. The fighting that did occur in Texas fell largely on the coast. Nevertheless, Texas suffered from the war as it would suffer from Reconstruction, and ironically, it likely suffered worse from the death of the man whose election to the presidency had led to the rebellion in the first place. In 1863, following the Battle of Gettysburg, an alternative to the occupation and subjugation of a defeated South had been proposed by Lincoln. Styled an Act for Amnesty and Reconstruction, it might have been the blueprint needed to heal the nation if its author had not been felled by an assassin's bullet on the night of Good Friday, 1865, just 4 days after Appomattox.
Well, darn me if you ain't the first raw, right down useful gal I've seen on this side of the pond.
What's that, sir? Do you want to make me jealous?
Oh, you needn't get your back up. You are the right sort, too. But you must own your small potatoes, and few in a hill compared to a gal like that.
I'm what?
Small potatoes.
Oh, will you be kind enough to translate that for me? For I don't understand American yet.
Yes, I'll put it in French for you. Petite pommes de terre.
It's very clear to me now. But, cousin, do tell me what you mean by calling me small potatoes.
Well, you can sing and paint and play on the piano, and in your own particular circle, you are some pumpkins.
Some pumpkins? First I'm small potatoes, and now I'm some pumpkins.
But she can milk cows, set up the butter, and make cheese, and darn me if them ain't what I call a raw, downright feminine accomplishments.
Our American Cousin was the hit of the season, a rollicking farce in which a boorish American, Asia Trenchard, visits his English cousin to claim an inheritance. The play relies on exaggerated stereotypes and cultural misunderstandings to milk its laughs from the audience. Though wildly popular since its debut in 1853, the play was the sort of light entertainment that the war-weary President of the United States and his wife needed that evening. The play had many moments that delighted its audiences, but one line in particular, near the end of the play, always brought the house down. And on that night, the 14th of April, a man with a gun waited outside the president's box, listening for that line.
Don't know the manners of good society, eh? Well, I guess I know enough to turn you inside out, old gal, you sock-dologizing old man-trap.
Semper Sig Tyrannis!
That man with a gun, of course, was John Wilkes Booth. Loyal Southerners like Booth resented Washington for interfering with the property rights of his countrymen, even those like Booth who did not own any slaves themselves. But he summed up the attitude of those who did by declaiming, "It's always thus with tyrants," as he leapt onto the stage. Indeed, Booth evidently fancied himself a modern-day Brutus, having appeared, along with both of his brothers, in a production of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar the year before, although ironically he had played Mark Antony, who, instead of joining the conspiracy against Caesar, avenges Caesar's death. When life imitated art, however, Booth found himself a fugitive instead of a hero, fleeing Washington as the news spread by telegraph, even as far as Indianapolis, 500 miles away, where another 26-year-old man was walking down the street.
Oh, no. This is terrible. Terrible! Hello! Oh, somebody help. You, boy! You there!
I'm sorry, I know. I'm not loitering.
Wait, come back here. Look! I need you to take this telegram to the newspaper office. It's at the end of the street.
Yes, sir. What's the matter?
Take this telegram to the newspaper office immediately. Don't look at it. Don't think. Just run as fast as you can.
Please, sir, at least let me know what's happened.
The president's been shot. Now go!
That young man was named Joe Weekly. Honorably discharged from the Army, Joe was a tinsmith by trade and had secured a contract to supply the Union with metal canteens. Though relieved that the war was over, young Joe had started feeling restless. Like many men of his generation, and of the country as a whole, Joe could not know what would happen next. In Texas, general chaos seemed to prevail. As news of Lee's surrender reached the state, riots and lawlessness preceded the expected arrival of Union troops, and the political leadership of the Confederacy largely fled to Mexico, fearful of being arrested and tried for treason. Some balked at the prospect of surrender, like General Joseph Shelby, who persuaded 1,000 of his men, along with the governors of Louisiana, Kentucky, and Texas, to cross the Rio Grande at Eagle Pass and request political asylum from the then Habsburg Emperor Maximilian. But by the time most of America received the news that Lincoln had been shot, John Wilkes Booth and an accomplice named David Harold had escaped Washington and were hiding in the Zacchaeus Swamp in rural Maryland, the unexpected guest of an inconvenient Southerner named Thomas A. Jones, who supplied them with food and water and the latest news.
Y'all gotta go. Yankee soldiers and detectives are pouring into St. Mary's County.
What is this?
Ah, my notices. Let me see.
How are we going to get out of here?
Cross the river. Y'all have to cross into Virginia tonight. There's more certainty of a man honoring his country there and less likelihood of them knowing about the price on y'all's heads. What's wrong? You look surprised.
I am surprised. Look at this filth. They're saying Lincoln was a martyr.
Never mind that. As soon as it's dark, I'll see y'all across.
Quite the opposite of what Booth expected when he and his co-conspirators hatched their plot to overthrow the government. Much of the country recoiled at the first successful attempt on the life of a U.S. president, and much of the stunned country united in ways that Booth had never imagined, so that by Easter Sunday, April the 16th, 1865, 2 days after he'd been shot, numerous pastors and preachers began connecting Lincoln's assassination to the crucifixion of Jesus.
Cain shed the blood of Abel, and Jesus paid that debt with his blood. The South bled the North bled the South. Abraham Lincoln has now paid their debt with his.
That Easter Sunday, Lincoln's body lay in state in the East Room of the White House, where it had been taken by an honor guard the day before. The body remained in the White House till April 19th, when, following a small funeral service, the coffin bearing the remains of the slain president was transferred in a somber procession down Pennsylvania Avenue to the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. On the 21st, after an early morning prayer service, it then traveled to the train depot in Washington, accompanied by Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, Union Army Commander Ulysses S. Grant, cabinet members, dignitaries, and members of Lincoln's family, and a reported crowd of 10,000 to see off the man, a funeral dirge written for the occasion described as the country's martyred father. Meanwhile, Booth, growing despondent that the revolution he had hoped to foment had not spontaneously resulted, wrote to his mother from that Maryland swamp. His words showed no remorse for his actions, only regret for his inconvenience, and a growing realization that his fate was all but sealed.
I have too great a soul to die like a criminal. I think I have done well, though I am abandoned. The curse of Cain upon me. I don't wish to shed a drop of blood, but I must fight the course. 'Tis all that's left to me.
The end came relatively quickly after Booth crossed over the Potomac from Maryland into Virginia. For a man who had appeared in some of the finest theaters in the Northeast and who had portrayed some of the greatest characters in English literature, the final performance of John Wilkes Booth's short life played out on a tragically reduced stage. By April 26th, the 16th New York Cavalry had tracked Booth and Harold to Richard Garrett's farm near Port Royal, Virginia. The sound of barking dogs and approaching horses woke the men as they lay sleeping in a tobacco shed, which the Garretts had surreptitiously locked to prevent the fugitives from stealing any of their horses.
Harold, wake up. You hear that?
Hey,
Horses, headed this way. We have to go. Get up. Damn, Garrett locked it. Garrett locked us in.
what? No. Can you pick it?
No, the slats in the back wall.
Stop. Shh. Here.
Trapped inside the shed, Booth let the frightened Harold go, and then, outnumbered by Federal troops who threatened to smoke him out by lighting the shed on fire, Booth proposed an improbable and predictably dramatic contest to preserve his honor.
Captain, I know you to be a brave man, and I believe you to be honorable. I am a cripple. I've got but one good leg. If you will withdraw your men in line 100 yards from the door, I will come out and fight you.
The troops were under orders from Secretary of War Edwin Stanton to take Booth alive, suspecting he had acted at the behest of the Confederate leadership itself. So when the troops turned down Booth's offer of a chivalrous duel, they set fire to the barn to smoke him out. As the flames spread, the troops stood at the ready, watching Booth's silhouette. Unlike Brutus, who in Shakespeare's play fell on his own sword rather than be captured by the advancing Roman army, Booth considered death by his own hand an ignoble way to die. Instead, he chose a final confrontation. With the flames crowding around him and the cavalry outside the shed in front of him, Lincoln's assassin hobbled forward, a crutch under his left arm, the stock of a carbine rifle against his right hip, and announced his exit in one final, theatrical valedictory to the Confederate battle flag.
One more stain on the old banner.
2 days later, on April 28th, Booth's body was transported from the ironclad USS Montauk to the old penitentiary in Washington's Navy Yard. The body was carried into the building by soldiers, while onlookers gawked until the gates of the prison closed them out, and the city and nation had something to celebrate in their time of mourning. In contrast, thousands paid their respects as Lincoln's body traveled through 180 cities, making 13 stops on its final journey to the president's home state of Illinois. And on April 30th, the Nashville steam engine pulled into the station in Indianapolis at 7 o'clock in the morning amidst an inappropriately gloomy rain. The casket bearing the president's remains was transferred from the train to a waiting hearse by a coterie of soldiers as the Indianapolis City Band played the Lincoln Funeral March. The ornately decorated hearse was drawn by 6 plumed white horses through the center of a town, bedecked in mourning and filled with mourners bedashed with rain. One of them, the second man in Indianapolis to hear the news of Lincoln's assassination, Joe Weekly, had donned his uniform again for the occasion and served as a pallbearer as the body of the president lay in state in the rotunda of the Indiana State Capitol, while an estimated 50,000 citizens paid their respects. Although the war in Texas would go on for another month and a half, followed by resistance to Reconstruction, young Joe, like many of his generation, cast about for a new direction. Going back east seemed out of the question, as the New York journalist Horace Greeley warned.
Washington, D.C. is not a place to live in. The rents are high, the food is bad, the dust is disgusting, and the morals are deplorable.
Greeley, however, offered an alternative, one that would sum up the restless energy of a still young country and a generation tempered in the foundry of war, anxious of their future and eager to manifest their destiny. For Weekly and young men like him, Greeley's admonition spurred them to
Go west, young man. Go west and grow up with the country.
Joe would heed that advice, arriving first in Galveston, but eventually settling in Brownwood, where he plied his trade and in 1876 opened what remains as Texas's oldest hardware store, Weekly Watson's. Bygone Brown is a co-production of the Brown County Historical Commission and Brownwood's Historic Lyric Theater. A beautifully illustrated companion guide to the series is available at Intermission Books and other locations downtown. Proceeds from the sale of the book support the Brown County Museum of History. Recorded at the elegant R.B. Rogers House and Events venue, Bygone Brown was written by Lamar Cravens, narrated by Tommy Bailey, and featured the voice talents of Dominique Glaske, Jonathan Harvey, Levi Packer, Val Nelson, Drex Holt, Jacob Bierman, Alexander Glass, Walker Willie, Graham Allen, Susie Harkey, Tracy Brandon Tucker, Allison Diaz, Aaliyah Curtis, Mackenzie Lair, Ryan Bailey, and Doug, Shannon, and Aaron Turner. To find out more about our thriving community and upcoming events, go to visitbrownwood.com.